The Clemson spring game is almost here. If this graphic doesn't get you excited, I don't know what will. I'm Ryan Cantor. We're going to talk about the Clemson spring game this weekend. It's on Saturday, 1 o'clock in Death Valley. There's a handful of different players that need to have a big year, need to elevate their game if Clemson's going to get back to the college football playoff and truly being an elite program once again. And the spring game is going to give us a look at some of those guys, see how far along they are, and kind of give us a glimpse into some of the steps that this program can make to get back to where they were just a couple years ago. This video will talk about some of those guys on defense. So without further ado, let's jump right in. One of them is Peter Woods. You've heard a lot of talk about Peter Woods, and for good reason. He's turning heads. Teammates Andrew Makuba, R.J. Mickens are raving about him, and I wanted to read this quote from his position coach, Nick Eason. Peter Woods has the twitchiness and the power and the quickness of some dominant NFL defensive linemen that I've been around. I'm not going to crown him the best ever, but the proof is in the pudding. Obviously, he's got to play this year, but I'll say he's got a talent level to obviously be an All-American, one of the best who has ever come through Clemson. That's his own coach talking. That is some really high praise. And Clemson fans are, he's a five-star out of Alabama. He chose Clemson over Auburn, over Alabama. It was a huge recruiting win. Some have called it the biggest recruiting win of the Dabo Swinney era, outside of quarterback, I assume. That this is the most hyped incoming freshman I've heard in a long time. And I did a video not too long ago about how you need to be patient with freshmen. They usually don't come on until the second half of the year. Mitch Hyde, Sammy Watkins were huge exceptions to that. It's really not what you see even at Clemson. But based on the talk, it seems like Peter Woods can make an impact right away. Now, with some of the guys in the interior of the offensive line out for the spring, he's been playing there. Ruko Horo, Tyler Davis back. I don't think he'll start I would be stunned if he started at defensive tackle, and I don't know how much room there is for him to rotate in with some of the good depth players they have there. So I expect him to play defensive tackle in the spring game, but if he's going to make a huge impact and get starter level snaps, I'm curious to see if he moves to the outside. So I'll definitely be watching to see if he does that in the spring game, but even if he doesn't, I just want to see just how dominant he really is. So he's one that I think everyone's going to have an eye on. And related to that brings me to the next one, and that's Justin Maskell. Maskell's a sixth-year player at Clemson, so we've definitely seen him, quite the kind of opposite pick here for Peter Woods. We've seen a lot of him, but we haven't really seen him make a huge impact. He had no sacks last year, hasn't had a sack since 2020. He's got 9 tackles for loss in his career. He had 3.5 last year. You see that PFF grade at 56.8. That may not mean anything to you, but just kind of to give that some boundaries there. KJ Henry was in the 80s. So that's a pretty big gap there. KJ Henry was the top-rated defensive end for Clemson. So pretty big gap. So Maskell, a lot of people are talking very optimistically about him. People think he could have that Kevin Dodd kind of final season breakout. KJ Henry really kind of had a final season breakout. He was maybe a little bit less out of nowhere than Dodd, but he elevated his game tremendously in his last year after being at Clemson for a long time. So maybe Maskell can do that, and his position coach Lemansky Hall has spoken very highly of him. Said this is a different Maskell. He's really taking care of his body. So maybe there's some optimism. And he's certainly a guy that you'd love to see really break out. He puts in his time, stayed for 6 years because he redshirted in that 2018 championship season. Then he got a COVID waiver for the 6th season at Clemson. So someone who sticks to the program and doesn't kind of buy into the transfer portal culture that's so frustrating for so many fans. You really want to see him do well. So he's definitely number 7, a guy I will definitely be keeping an eye on in the spring game. And then the last of that position, defensive end lost a lot of guys with Myles Murphy and KJ Henry going to the NFL. So there's kind of a void there. Obviously, you have Xavier Thomas who elected to come back, but he's not healthy in the spring, and I think he's a elite pass rusher when he's healthy, but I don't think you can just assume they'll be healthy all year. So you really need to see some of these guys come through. And Cade Denhoff, that was a 4-star recruit out of Florida. They just really need to see him be consistent at practice so they can trust him in the game. They need him at minimum for depth, potentially as a starter. I mean, I don't think that's what the thought is right now, but that could change. And I think a big spring game would go a long way. So he's another one I'd like to see, and I'll be keeping an eye. I'd like to see do well, number 44, K. Denhoff. So that's defensive end. Those are three guys on defense to watch out for. But I think maybe bigger than any of them is this guy, Andrew Makuba. So as a freshman, he was incredible. He had a 77 PFF grade. And I put the breakdowns of the PFF grades going across here in the columns. So you could see just a big drop off from freshman year to sophomore year. Really across the board, his rush defense was unbelievable. He was a great, really an elite tackler, and that fell off. His pass coverage really dropped off. Bluntly, he was kind of bad last year, and we know what he can do because we saw as a freshman. What sort of came to light more recently was some of the injuries that we didn't know about. We knew about the dislocated elbow, but here's his position coach, Mickey Kahn. He said it's been a different Andrew this spring. We don't plan to put him out there a corner this year. We want to put him at strong safety or nickel and let him play. So they moved him around a little bit last year and felt like that messed with him a little bit. He continued, I've really seen improvement this spring in his man technique, his footwork. He's a lot more fluid, fast, and just the confidence. Last year, he had a dislocated elbow, a hurt ankle, and knee, and just some things. It's hard to play with that kind of speed and skill that he plays with. It's nice when you can use all your limbs. So it sounds like the injuries, it was more than just the dislocated elbow. We kind of suspected maybe that was what was holding him back, and it was, but it was also other injuries too. So getting him back fully healthy, they also noted that he gained 10 pounds of muscle, so hopefully that helps him play more physical, but also stay healthy. I think that is huge. Clemson's biggest weakness on defense was their pass defense, giving up big plays. And they've got other good safeties. I think R.J. Mickens is potentially the most underrated player on the defense, maybe the whole team. But regardless, Andrew Makuba has that All-American potential. So if you can get him healthy, playing at his peak, that bump is such a huge upgrade to the pass defense. That could go maybe longer than anything else. So Andrew Makuba, number one, is another guy I'll definitely be watching. Let's see if he can have a big spring game and yield a lot of optimism for what this pass defense could do next year.